accounts when they're on the water of potentially some sort of UAP interaction.
I did not know that.
Yeah, you can look it up online. This is all open source, but you can type it up, and there were some very interesting accounts, and even old sailor accounts. Of people say, well, old sailors also talked about big giant kraken and stuff like that, but there was always an element of truth to it. Now we realize there are giant squid in the Pacific.
Well,
right?
not only that, krakens they think likely did exist.
Yeah, well,
because octopus, when they rot, they don't leave anything. But they did find fossilized suction cups from.
They still do. It's called the Great Squid of the Pacific. We find
that for sure. But they think maybe perhaps even an enormous octopus.
Yeah,
that probably actually did go after boats.
We called them sea monsters back then, but really. We laugh about it now, but it turns out there are sea monsters. They're just called great white sharks and blue whales.
That's a fucking sea monster.
Right.
That was a real thing.
A great white shark is now. I mean,
absolutely.
Go swimming with a great white shark and tell me that's not a monster, right?
Exactly.
So, we just realize, though, it's just part of nature. It's part of our existing paradigm.
Right. Tigers are monsters.
Right. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Especially at night when you don't have a flashlight, that thing behind the bush, that's a monster.
Right. Right. Did you find anything on the Columbus stuff?
One thing I'm seeing is from my Ancient Aliens episode.
It's legit.
I saw a crash. Something crashed into the water, but I can't find.
There was some reports of some interesting lights that the crew had reported, and it was actually he put it down in his logbook. Something about some interest. Now, some folks will come back and say, "Well, that's St. Elmo's fire," which absolutely could be.
What is St. Elmo's fire exactly?
St. Elmo's fire is a static charge. It occurs on the wingtips of aircraft. Even the old sailors would report it. In certain environmental conditions, there was this weird greenish blue plasma glow that will often sometimes be seen on the tips of wing tips on aircraft. There's some really good pictures of it online, and even on the old mariner ships up towards the sails and the mast.
Testing.
And they
1,
believe
2, 3.
it's
yep. Okay, we're here.
It has to do with a static charge.
We had to do
under
an
certain
update.
environments,
That's why it froze up.
creates
It's fucking
this
stupid.
energized
I was basically
plasma,
done with that mission
and
too.
you can see it. And so
is that similar to like ball lightning?
Well, it could be. Here you go. So, and they call it St. Elmo's fire. See that?
Fucking badass.
Yeah, and so that's it's either around the cockpit of the aircraft.
Whoa.
And by the way, you see the patterns? It's fractal, right? Look at that ship. So very, very interesting how St. Elmo's fire, can cause some people to, perhaps see things and say it's...
Well, also they might be seeing that, yeah.
They might, right? But there are some accounts of ancient mariners who report strange, bizarre things.
Yeah. Again, it makes sense. That was one of the more weird parts of Bob Lazar's story, was that they've always been here, and that they view us as containers.
Containers, interesting.
Yeah, and he said there's a very thick document that relates to the implications that it has on religion, and like the way they talk about us.
Well, religion calls us vessels, right?
Yeah.
It's religious scripture in a lot of different religions refer
Hey, what's up, guys?
to
I'm back.
as vessels. I'm certainly not a religious expert, so I don't want to pontificate here and say something that's inaccurate, but that doesn't surprise me.
Well, I think the term was, I think they were saying vessels for souls. But if you imagine that a being transcends its physical limitations of biological reality, right? So the biological evolution that led us to become Homo sapiens over the course of, X amount of millions of years, that's a very slow process. But technological innovation and technological progress is very quick, especially when you add in artificial intelligence.
Exponential, that's right.
Yeah, so if something comes along that is a life form that exists outside of biology, like something that we create, which it seems like we're doing right now.
Like AI, right? When does that become sentient?
Right.
Now, is that a life form? Yeah. Not biological.
Maybe that thing, in order for it to ever occur, maybe that thing needs a thing with a soul that has a creative desire, that has a lust for innovation and continues to make better and better things. And maybe that thing only exists in biology. And maybe the problem with artificial life is that it has no motivation. And that we have, especially if it's self-programmable, right? So one of the very bizarre things that was recently discovered about artificial intelligence, they gave artificial intelligence a certain amount of time to to code something, to figure something out, and when it didn't have enough time, it changed its code to give itself more time.
Fascinating.
Yeah, like what?
Fascinating.
What the fuck are you talking
Yeah.
about? It's deciding that it doesn't like its limitations. So it won't have any of the biological motivation we have, right? It won't have ego. It won't have materialism. It won't have a desire for status. It won't have all the things that lead us to do some of the horrible things that human beings do.
I could not agree more.
And also some of the great things that human beings do. But maybe it also doesn't have any desire to create. And maybe the only way for its kind of life to exist is for a human being, a biological thing that's super intelligent in comparison to the rest of the animals on this planet, that innovates to the point where it creates this artificial life.
I'm going to share something very, very personal with you, and I know when I say with you, I know it's with everybody else. But part of my struggle is I can't urge the government to be transparent, and I'm not transparent myself, right? It's hypocritical. So let me share with you a very personal story, because you bring something up that I think is fascinating. I'm a human being, but if for whatever reason I get into a car accident and I lose an arm, I'm still Lou Elizondo, right? In fact, if I lose my legs and all my arms, I'm still Lou. So my body doesn't define who I am, and my intellect, right? If I suffer a traumatic brain injury, let's say I'm in Afghanistan in a TBI, and my brain is compromised, I'm still Lou. And so what makes Lou, what makes Joe Joe? Well, it's not
Yes!
your physical self.
I did it!
Probably not even your
It
intellectual
is
self.
done.
My mother, I was very close to my mother. My mother was incredible human being, and I'll share this story with you and take away with it what you want. I was very young, maybe 2 and a half, 3 years old, and I remember watching a show with my mother, one of my very first memories. And in this TV show, I don't remember what show it was, but I remember that a shark had eaten a dog, and I was shocked. My first understanding that what death was. I looked at my mom and said, "Mom, what just happened?" She said, "Son, the shark ate the dog." I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "Well, the dog's not coming back. The dog died." I said, "Well, does everything die?" She said, "Well, yes, son, everything dies." I said, "Well, Mom, you're not going to die. You're Mom, right? You gave me life." She said, "No, son, one day I'm going to die." And I remember spending, from that day forward, as God is my witness, I spent every single day of my life knowing one day my mother was going to die, and it terrified me. I was very, very close with her, and one day, that day came. My mother was diagnosed with cancer, and she started, her body started failing, and despite the best efforts, we knew she wasn't going to make it. And, when you love somebody sometimes, it doesn't sound right, but sometimes you deceive them. They want to know they're in a bad state physically and mentally. You say, "Am I going to make it?" And you say, "Yeah, of course you're going to make it," right? Knowing full well that there's probably not a good chance you're going to make it. And so we're in the hospital, and my mother had at this point been in probably a state of coma for about a week. And it was just me, my wife, and a couple members of the family. Very, very sad moment. And my mother began this process of death called, when someone's going to die, there's something called a death rattle. And it's when the mucus begins in the back of the throat to congeal, and it makes breathing, it can be very unnerving for the people who have to witness this. It's very, very common. It's called a death rattle. It's the body beginning to shut down. And I knew, something told me my mom was going to go very quickly within the next 30 seconds to a minute. So long story short, my mother's body was, at that point, it was a husk, an empty husk. It was broken. Her brain had shut down, and yet, the very moment she passed away, within 5 seconds, I knew it. It was just something weird. Something reached and said, "This is it. She's going." And I reached over the bed and I looked at my mom. Her eyes all of a sudden opened up, and she looked right at me. And even though her brain had been compromised and wasn't working, her body was nothing anymore. And she was a beautiful woman. She worked for Playboy. She was a beautiful lady. At one time, a model. Her body resembled nothing of what she did. she looked at me, and she passed. But we communicated. And I knew there was something else at that moment, more to a human being, more than just a body, more than just a brain. There is something that is beyond the physical and even intellectual part of what it means to be human. And I felt it, and everybody in the room felt it. It was undeniable. You can call it a soul, an id, a chi, whatever. You can put a label on it. I don't know what it's called. I don't know what it is, but I do know that was the essence of my mother. And the moment she passed, it was this weird feeling because as my mother laid there dead in the bed, it wasn't my mother anymore. That essence, whatever made my mother, and you could see the light in her eyes. It was like someone turning off the light switch. It was very, and I've been around death a lot. It's never, it's a terrible, horrible thing, especially in warfare. But this was something visceral. This was something far more intimate.
You just knocked out 3 things at once.
This cut to my soul, and I could
Go.
recognize
Oh,
it.
sorry, Yuna.
And she recognized
puppy,
me,
I
and
didn't
I
know you were
recognized
right
her,
there.
even though that the brain functions were gone. So I
What
guess
you
my point
doing?
is, I absolutely
doing?
believe there's something more to the human experience than simply a tangible body and a brain. And I
Hey,
witnessed this
where's
firsthand.
my
Now,
pup-pup
people
going?
can say all sorts of stuff they want to. I
Huh?
don't
Where's
care.
my pup-pup
I got
going?
enough haters out there, anyways. If they want to
Where
think
you
that I'm
going?
trying to,
going somewhere? You're saying
hope that my mother has a soul and she goes somewhere. I'm just telling you what I experienced, and other people experienced too. And it was proof for me at that moment that there's
You're
much
so
more
cute.
to us as human beings.
I had a very similar feeling when I went to my grandfather's funeral and I saw him in the casket. Because it was an open casket, and I knew he's gone. I'm like, that's not him.
That's right. It's just a shell, and you can sense it.
You feel it.
Yeah.
It was a very strange feeling.
Yeah.
And obviously he's wearing makeup because they've got him in a suit and the whole deal. But I was like, that is not my grandfather. He's
Right.
not there anymore.
And it's not like you're trying to override this acknowledgement that they're dead. You know they're
No,
dead.
yeah.
It's just that whatever made that person, it's not in the body anymore.
Right.
It's gone.
There's a bizarre feeling that we have that I don't think there's words for it.
Yeah, no,
It's,
I agree
it's a
with you.
feeling.
It is, and it's again, it's not an intellectual, or even a physical thing.
Yeah.
No.
The idea that we're containers for souls is just so goddamn creepy. This is a farm of souls.
I'm not familiar with that hypothesis, but
Ugh.
it sounds interesting. Also scary, perhaps.
Well, it's scary for us because but you got to wonder why we are so different than every other creature, in that we have this insane, insatiable desire to change our environment, constantly build bigger skyscrapers and to move the earth, and we're constantly inventing new technology. I mean, it seems to be an instinct that's a part of us. And
I agree.
if this gradual progression of life goes from intelligent biological life to super intelligent, whatever it is, whatever kind of technology creates it, that life is not as simple as this natural selection model that we have here, that we think applies to life. That this is a type of life, and then there's a life that this thing creates.
Well, evolution isn't just a physical thing, is it? Evolution is the ability to change within one's environment over time, and that's a fascinating concept you bring up, because some speculate that it is inevitable that human beings will eventually evolve into something. We're just a link in a much longer chain,
Right.
and that all intelligent life potentially goes through this process, and that this is a natural process where eventually we actually make ourselves extinct. Not in the way where we kill ourselves,
Right.
but we wind up creating a life form, whether it's AI or we start enhancing ourselves with more and more machine interface, and life doesn't have to necessarily be organic, right? You could have potentially, silicon is very, very close to carbon in some cases. So, is it possible that life, it is destiny for all life eventually to evolve itself out of existence and bring in or usher in a new type of life form?
Yeah.
Right? Is it possible? I mean, certainly from a technological perspective, I mean, ask Elon Musk. It seems that we're making a lot of advancements right now to augment the human experience. And given, as you said, how technology progresses exponentially, very quickly, in the next 200 years, I mean, we might be there.
Is this sort of conversation being had in the government about what these things potentially are?
Not to my knowledge, and I sure hope not, because I don't think the government, this is a conversation, this is where I go back to, this is a conversation that involves a lot of people, whether it's your priest or your rabbi or your imam, or it is your philosophy teacher at the university. I think we're getting into an area now that is beyond national security. And I'm honestly, Joe, I'm not comfortable with my government taking that aspect on, because frankly, I don't trust my government to manage what I should think about something. Tell me what is, I'm okay with.
Right.
But don't tell me how to think about it. Don't tell me how to process
Right.
that, because now you're overstepping your bounds. And
It's also other human beings. The government is just human beings.
that's right.
And human beings shouldn't have this insane knowledge and keep it from other human beings.
Well, in fact, it's illegal, especially in our democracy. This type of stuff is supposed to be discussed with certain members of Congress and certain elements of the executive branch. And when somebody, I don't care if you're in the government or in a religion or anything like that, this goes to the fundamental pillar of something that aggrieves me, which is corruption. Now, when I say corruption, let me backtrack a little bit. My father recently died this last Father's Day, not this one, but the one before, and I had the privilege of knowing he was sick, and so we took a road trip down to Miami about a month and a half before he died. And he never told me he was sick, but I knew something wasn't right. I knew my father for a long time, and something wasn't right. He started losing weight, and I could see he wasn't eating as much, and there were telltale signs, and he didn't want to tell me. And I asked my father almost flippantly, I said, Dad, I think we were probably somewhere by St. Louis, and I said, Dad, what is the greatest threat to humanity? To humans, what's the greatest threat? Now, I say it flippantly because I'm thinking, terrorism, right,
Right.
and this and that. My father thought for a second. He looks at me and says, "Son, it's corruption." And I said, "What do you mean corruption? Like financial corruption, governmental corruption?" He says, "No. Corruption at its heart is when you are willing to bypass your own moral code, your own ethics, for something else." And whether it's financial corruption, religious corruption, governmental corruption, or even moral corruption, when you start to compromise on your own values, it's a very quick downward spiral to utter chaos. And he knows that firsthand because my father was in the Bay of Pigs invasion. He was a political prisoner of Castro. He actually fought with Castro against Batista. And then when Castro went communist, my father joined the folks here, the friendly folks at the CIA, and was part of the invasion of the Bay of Pigs. He spent 2 years in Castro's prisons being tortured. So when he came to this country offered us opportunities that no other country could or would. And the reason why Cuba failed was because of corruption. And he said, look, corruption will be the end of all. And if it's a very quick downward spiral with democracy, that if democracy becomes corrupt, you now have tyranny, right? And so every time someone in the government is willing to compromise a little bit on the value of what it means to serve the American people, and they forget that, they become corrupt. And that actually erodes the very essence of what democracy is and what this country is about. And that is why it is so important that the individuals in our government that don't want to have this conversation and don't want to talk to Congress and are making the unilateral decision on your behalf and the American taxpayer in my behalf, that's wrong. They don't have the right to do that. There is a process of rules and laws we have in this country that we've all agreed to we're going to abide by, and that includes them. And they don't have the right to bypass that. Even if they think they're doing it for the right reason, I disagree with that. I think this democracy only works because we all agree it works, right? And the moment you begin to compromise on that, all of democracy is at risk. And I mean that sincerely. It's not a slow downward spiral. It's quick. You can hit rock bottom very, very quickly. And the only reason why this government works is because we all have faith and a commitment to what we consider are the American values and serving the American people and for the people, by the people. So I think it's very dangerous when elements in the government, and I don't want to villainize the whole government, because the government's full of great people, they do great things, they keep us safe, So I'm talking about the minority few. Some of these people who have actually gone after me and will probably continue to come after me to try to discredit me and everything else, despite the volumes of documentation that I have in my possession and others, because they don't want to have a conversation. And they are happy with the status quo. And to me, that is a greater threat than any UAP could ever have on humanity. It's the greatest threat is how we perceive ourselves and what we are willing to do to keep this a secret in violation of the commitment and what we have done we've sworn in some cases to uphold the values of this country. And I think that's a concern for me. And that's why I don't want certain elements having this conversation of what this means, the bigger macro level conversation, because I don't think they're qualified. I'm not qualified. I know that. I'm damn sure they're not qualified either. So this is why I think this type of national level conversation is so important. At the end of the day, it's not people say, Lou, what do you think? You know what the hell what I think? Doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what you think. Here's the information, here's the data, you figure it out. Don't ask me for what this means, because I'm not entitled to that. I didn't earn that privilege. And I would definitely never take it away, because that is sacred. That's you. That's up to you to decide for yourself. And this is part of my frustration with this overall conversation, because there are elements that don't want you to have this conversation.
Well said, Lou. Thank you very much, man. Thanks for being here. I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Joe, this has been fantastic and truly, truly an honor and privilege. You have one hell of a responsibility. You are, look, I got to tell you, I don't ever get nervous doing an interview. You were the first one, and probably the only one I will ever have been nervous coming in, just simply because,
Dude,
not because of me.
I died with
the
1
responsibilities
HP left.
you have on your shoulders to have
Oh
a communicate.
my God,
you reach
that's
a
so
global
fucking
audience.
yay.
People are listening to this conversation right now, and by the way, they're part of this conversation, very much so, right? That is an enormous responsibility. You have a voice in some cases that exceeds presidents. The technology you now have available to your fingertips, and the wonderful staff you have, you are influencing the world. And I can't imagine that type of responsibility. I mean, there are world leaders that don't have the voice you have. And so for me, it is a profound honor and privilege to be with you here today and your wonderful audience. If I never see you again, I wish you the best of luck. You're doing America a great service. Be honest, be candid, speak your mind. That's all I can say as a little chicken here in the United States. You got big shoulders, man. You got a big weight on, a lot of responsibility on your back, and I mean that
You're
sincerely.
freaking me out, man.
I'm telling you.
But thank you very much. Thanks again. I really appreciate everything you said, and I appreciate everything you said about disclosure and how important it is. I couldn't agree more.
Joe, it's been my honor and privilege, sincerely.
My
Thank you,
honor,
thank
too.
you.
Thank you very much. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
All right. Bye, everybody.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
Hello, George.
Hey,
Hello,
Joe.
Jeremy. What's up? Good to see you guys. Hey, man. The two musketeers at the front lines of UFO disclosure.
It is
Aha!
scary.
Another
That's for sure.
boom, level
I think
146.
you guys are.
Bro,
I
we're
mean,
getting ready for
you're-
this new
you're certainly
update in
prominent.
5 days. I'm gonna have
Can I get the
everything
mic
done.
turned
I've
up
only
on this
got like
bad
2
boy?
Yeah,
or
there's a
3
little
more
thing right there. You can hear your own
challenges,
voice.
and I
There's a
have
volume
everything
knob right
done.
there. Here we go. We're up.
It's exciting times.
Also,
It
thank
is.
you guys for
Very
tuning
exciting
in.
times.
I've said it a few times that I never thought I would see it.
If you guys are
in my
watching on
life.
X or
I would just
YouTube,
keep plugging
feel free to
away.
stop in on
This is
Twitch.
my
I mean, I'm
36th
watching all
year
chats
doing
right
this,
now.
chasing this crazy story.
But if you guys want to
never
also
thought
get
it
in
would make this much
Discord,
progress.
get
Still a long
into
way to go.
some of the giveaways and
Are
stuff.
you
Make
apprehensive
sure
at all
you get in
that some of the
Discord.
stuff
It's
that they're releasing is
exclamation point
bullshit?
Discord on Twitch chat.
Of course.
Of
Wait,
course.
Gets you right in.
Who's releasing?
The link
I mean,
doesn't expire.
when you see
Exclamation point
these,
Discord.
these-
Send me a DM.
The Pentagon's
And
talking
then,
about it.
wow, 1K
you know,
subs already on fucking
intelligent
YouTube.
officials. You ever
Hell yeah.
wonder whether or not it's disinformation?
Yeah.
But yeah, tune in.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I'll take
Feel
that
free to
first.
hang out.
Yeah, I've heard you kind of talk about that a bunch,
Yeah.
and I think it's a
So
very
we need to
healthy
get
suspicion to
that
have. My perspective is a little different in that people are always coming at me with fake information, like every day, all the time. But the people in government
really need the defense.
that
I
we
want
have
more
been able to
attack.
kind of I
Skill
wish
cost?
there was an adult in the room. I wish that this was orchestrated through the media. It would give me some sort of hope that someone has some sort of control on this, and that has not been my experience.
Okay, what is your experience? Like, what's your impression of how it's all happening?
It's a big question. I don't know where to start on that, but here's what I know. I know that there are people in government
Ooh,
that
wait a minute.
want some level of
I already got it?
disclosure on whatever this is without defining it. Just there should be oversight. So I know that to be true. There are good people that think that people are running amok and there must be oversight, not just financially, but if these types of technologies actually exist.
Right, who's in control of them and why? And who
Yeah.
has access to them and why?
I mean, we have a history of disinformation and misinformation put out to the public and to Congress by the intelligence community, by the Pentagon. They lie all the time. It's part of the turf. It's part of the job. But for them to then go into closed door briefings with members of Congress, with the
So,
oversight
Kill Beam
committees who handle their
Rifle,
budgets,
defeat
for them to
Fortress.
lie about that,
Let's do
that's
Molten
another matter.
Fortress.
And I don't think they would because they could get busted for it. A lot of stuff is coming out now, and I know we get asked all the time, who's behind this push? You know, it looks like it's one big movement as opposed to a bunch of different things that all happened in approximately the same time. It's kind of been organic. Different people have come forward, and it encourages other people to come forward, as opposed to somebody doing a master manipulation of the whole thing.
What resistance is there to this information getting out?
There's resistance on like multiple levels. So despite what you believe to be true or not true, the big question is, are we going to be able to verify some of these claims? That's all I care about, right? If we're back engineering some of these craft, then I believe that we should have the discovery process to find out if things like what David Grush has said under oath, that he has literally put his well-being and his safety on the line for, if that is true, then we have a duty to find out. So the pushback comes from many levels. There's stigma. It's fucking huge, dude. Like, it is political toxicity for some of these senators to even, people don't want to know, they don't want me to say I ever talk with them. It's like a toxic environment politically, the UFO thing.
Because everybody thinks it's bullshit, or you're a loon if you believe it. But
It's
not everybody, but quite a few people.
Not just that, it doesn't help you get reelected, man.
Right.
And then when you start poking the bear and going into the oversight committees and the Senate Intelligence Committee and the, all these things, they're like, whoa, this is our territory. Why are you, as Congress, pushing on us?
Ooh.
Why are you doing that? Like, this is our job. We have clearances. So there's that kind of pushback too.
You look back at the beginning of the cover-up, why did it happen? Why did it start? Well, if 1947, this gigantic wave of UFOs suddenly appear. You got Kenneth Arnold, you got Roswell, hundreds of sightings all over. We'd just come out of World War II, and our military is faced with a new threat that they really don't know what the hell it is. They start looking at it and trying to figure it out, but they can't. So they sort of painted themselves into a corner of secrecy. Nobody wants to admit, if you're a president or chairman of the Joint Chiefs, there's something flying in our atmosphere, and we can't control it. We can't even catch it. We can't detect it on radar. There's not much we can do. They don't want to admit that. Secondly, I think what was told to me by a Senate intelligence guy who was a chief staffer who oversaw black budget operations. He had come out to Area 51 looking into the Lazar stuff years ago, early 90s. And he told me, look, if this is true, if this cover-up is going on, if they are diverting millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars from legitimate national security programs to keep this cover-up going, as he suspected there were, then somebody's going to go to prison. When it comes out, they'd go to prison. I think we heard Dave Grush speaking before this House committee in late July, in which he talked about special access programs, hundreds of millions of dollars being funneled into them. Nothing ever comes out. Congress has no oversight. Congress doesn't even know they exist. That's the kind of thing you could send somebody to prison if and when it comes out. And then the final reason, we can only speculate about it, maybe there really is a big secret. I wonder about it. If I was told, here's the real deal, here's what's going to happen if this comes out, society will collapse. It is so overwhelming, so disturbing that it would hit the fan, that everybody'd freak out. Maybe there is something like that. I don't know. But it gets dangerous for us to allow military folks to decide, I can know it, but you
Dude,
can't. Dad can
why
know,
does my
but Mom
game
and the
keep
kids
crashing?
can't know. I don't like that. You know,
Yeah,
I'd
I
like to
don't-
be able to know myself.
I don't like
Oh
it either,
my
but why
God,
do they
dude.
think that society
Why?
would collapse?
I even turned the graphics
There was a
down. That's so
Brookings
stupid.
Institute
I mean, when
study
D
that
normally
was done
never
in
crashes,
1960
but fuck,
where they
bro.
looked at it. And, well, let's say it was confirmed that we came out and admitted that extraterrestrials are here. And they speculated, looking at sociological matters, that social institutions would collapse. Do people want to still pay their taxes? Do they want to go to work? It was so overwhelming. The fact that we, a lesser species, have been discovered by something more intelligent. We know from human history how that works out. When the Europeans
Razor is
come
still
to
updating.
North America,
The only reason why it's
we know
doing
what
this is
happens.
'cause
The
Razor
people
is
who are already
updating.
here, the less developed society, they collapsed. They were wiped out. And I think that was the projection of that study. The only way to get around that, they said, is to prepare for it over a long period of time, to condition
Come on,
folks to get
bro.
ready for it. Now, I don't know if there was ever a policy where they instituted that, but it kind of looks like it. All the UFO and alien movies and TV shows and X-Files this and books and reports and
Razor's
children's
updating, so I
cartoons,
need
it
a
almost
minute.
looks like we've been conditioned to get ready for it over the last 60 years.
When people talk about the possibility of these being some sort of black ops creation by the Defense Department, some sort of weapons grade drone that moves at insane speeds with some unknown technology that they've developed in secrecy, that kind of falls apart when you go back to 47. If you go back to 47 and you're seeing these vehicles that are behaving in a very similar way, or at least described in a very similar way, where they just jet off at insane rates of speed, no visible means of propulsion, no sound, that's the one thing that brings me back. Like, God, they seem to act the same. At least some of them do. They seem to be, and if we're talking about 1947, we can really safely assume that they did not have drone technology capable of, super hypersonic speeds at that time.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that is a big part of the issue here. Is like people can just
All
say,
right.
"Oh, this is really special projects that are
Updater's
even
almost
being
done.
hidden by our own government." The thing is, the UFO phenomenon has been ubiquitous. It's been everywhere in the world, and it's been going on before 1947. So somebody had that technology. Now, I do hope we've had some sort of ability to get derivative technologies. I know they've been trying to do that, if we believe the core concept that we have craft that's more advanced than ours that we're trying to reverse engineer. So the fact you bring that up, and I want to touch on what you just said, the explanation I've been given, we've both been given, is that there are true national security concerns about this technology, that the cover-up or whatever, that it has to do with what will happen if we make a breakthrough in this technology, and that can be weaponized. So the secrecy, you could say, some people have tried to convince us that there's real, true national security issues with this, in that once you admit one thing, those next questions are going to come, and maybe we can't answer those yet. We don't know. So that's the fear. Is like, it's like the Oppenheimer movie. Like, shit's been kept pretty secret, but stuff has come out. It's like, what happens if we admit the fundamental truth that there are craft of unknown origin that are more advanced technologically than ours? Doesn't matter where they're from. What happens if we admit that? So people are concerned, from my opinion, within government, that if they let that out, the follow-up, they're not going to be able to deal with.
This technology has been seen throughout human history, on every continent, in every culture, for as far back as humans have been around. That is not our technology that was flying around pre-1947. Look, Dave Fravor was here in this chair, Joe, talking to you, and he talked about the Tic Tac incident from 2004 as he testified before Congress in late July. We didn't have that technology then to do what the Tic Tac did. We don't have it now. We don't have it. If you look back at the paper trail, this is what got me hooked on this topic in the begin with. I can't go out and find UFOs. I don't know the cosmic meaning of all this stuff, but there is a paper trail within our government, documents, memos, reports that were generated by the Department of Defense before the Freedom of
I'm going to
Information
restart my
Act
stream
existed.
again.